The first time I made an alien almost faint, it wasn't with a weapon or a speech. It was with a biology chart. We were in Lecture Hall 9 of Asterion Interstellar University, a broad glass dome bolted to the spine of an orbital ring. Stars wheeled slowly past the ceiling like patient lanterns. 200 students sat in tiered seats shaped for everything from serpentine bodies to insectal frames to beings that looked like animated fog. I was one of 3 humans in the entire xenobiology program and the only human male in the room that day. Professor Seln, who resembled a folded umbrella given sentience, tapped a limb against the hollow podium. The display shimmered alive, comparative reproductive cycles across sapient species. Today, Seln said, voice like dry paper, we address the most common cause of interstellar diplomatic incidents after untranslated idioms and accidental religious offenses. A ripple of amused pheromones drifted from the amphitheater. Reproductive assumptions. I sank a little deeper into my seat, already regretting eating anything with garlic. When you're the only human male in the room and the professor brings up reproduction, you learn very quickly how to look invisible without actually turning transparent. Seln's hollow chart blossomed into color-coded rings. Long cycles, short cycles, seasonal spikes, lunar link spirals. The alien next to me, Krrina of the Lithari, lined in, her frilled cheeks brightening. She was an exchange student from a planet with 2 suns, and her species treated mating season the way humans treated tax day, inevitable, universal, and a little traumatic. Krrina had 4 arms, a soft crest like seaweed, and the kind of academic ambition that could cut glass. She'd been the first to befriend me in this program, partly out of curiosity and partly, I suspected, because she wanted a front-row seat to any human weirdness. Seln highlighted a cycle on the chart labeled Lythari, vernal heat 12 days. Krrina gave a proud little trill. Order, Seln said, and shifted the hollow to the next ring. Human continuous fertility, no seasonal heat. There was a beat of silence so sharp I could have sliced an apple with it. Then Krrina's crest went from pale teal to a stark, alarming white. What, she whispered, voice suddenly thin, is that? I glanced at the hollow and then back to her. That's accurate, her pupils contracted to pinpoints. No season, no season. Her frills fluttered like a flag in a storm. No cycle lock, no compulsory heat window, no pheromone override. Nope. Krrina sat perfectly still. Then she made a sound that I can only describe as the noise a kettle would make if it experienced existential dread. Across the room, a drama student, 6-legged, feathered, and smug, snorted. Impossible. A sapient species must have regulated mating periods to maintain societal stability. Otherwise they would breed constantly, someone else finished, horrified. A hush fell like gravity. Professor Seln's eye stalks rotated slowly toward me. Marcus Hale, the professor said. As the resident specimen, would you care to clarify? 200 faces turned. Some had eyes, some had clusters of photoreceptors. One was a floating polyhedron that stared with an entire side. My mouth went dry. I raised a hand because apparently my survival instincts had been replaced by a student loan contract. Humans don't have a mating season, I said carefully. Our reproductive capability doesn't switch on for a few days a year. It's always potentially there. A murmur surged through the hall like wind through tall grass. Krrina swayed. Krrina, I whispered. You okay? Her voice trembled. Then how do you prevent? I knew what she meant. Everyone did. Professor Seln tilted. Yes, do explain how your species avoids total societal collapse. A few students leaned forward like they were watching a trial. I swallowed. We use culture, laws, personal responsibility, consent. The word consent made the translator shimmer. Several aliens blinked, their implants scrambling to map the concept across species. Consent, the smug drama repeated as if tasting something suspicious. Yeah, I said, it's a mutual agreement, like nobody gets to just decide for someone else. Ever, not because of pheromones, not because of a season, not because the moon is green. If you don't have permission, you don't do anything. A silence again, different this time, not sharp, heavy. Krrina's crest flickered from white to a sickly lavender. She stared at me as if I'd confessed to wrestling comets. You mean, she whispered, you are always in heat, I choked. No, not heat, we're not constantly, always capable, the drama cut in, eyes gleaming with accusation, a walking risk. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. We're always capable, yes, but we're not driven by a seasonal compulsion. That's the point, we can choose. Professor Seln's voice softened a fraction. Choice, a luxury many species do not possess. Krarina's breathing sped up. I saw it, the tremor in her shoulders, the way her frills pinched inward. Krarina, hey, I murmured, leaning toward her. You're safe, it's just information. She turned to me very slowly. Marcus, if there is no season, when do you court? I thought about dating apps, awkward dinners, high school dances, and the entire chaotic mess of human romance. Whenever, I said, honest. Krarina made a small keening noise and then she toppled sideways like a cut flower. Oh, I caught her before she hit the floor, which did not improve the situation. 200 students gasped. A dozen different species released alarm pheromones. The floating polyhedron emitted a sustained tone like a fire alarm. Professor Seln slapped the emergency console. Medical drone. A silver sphere zipped from the ceiling, scanned Krarina and beeped. Lithari student experiencing acute syncope due to stress response, it announced cheerfully. Recommendation, remove stimulus. Every eye stalk swung to me again. Yeah, I said, hoarse, remove me, great plan. Krarina came to in the university infirmary, curled in a padded nest designed for beings with too many limbs. I sat on a stool beside her, hands clasped like I was trying to keep my own species under control through sheer willpower. She blinked at me. Her crest was back to teal, though it pulsed faintly at the edges. Did I, she rasped, make a fool of myself? You fainted dramatically in front of 200 xenobiologists, I said. So yes, but in the most academically iconic way possible. She huffed, a sound halfway between laughter and a sob. You humans truly are monsters. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. Krarina stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then she turned her head toward me again, frills lifting. Marcus, she said carefully, I must ask this plainly for science. Okay, if your males are always capable, why do you not seize? The word translated oddly, part predation, part inevitability. I felt heat creep up my neck, not from lust, but from the weight of what she was really asking. Why don't you hurt each other? Because we decided not to, I said. Krarina's eyes widened. That's not a complete answer, she said, voice trembling again. It's the only one I've got. I took a breath. Look, humans have impulses like any species. We get angry, we get scared, we want things. But we built systems, laws, norms, education to keep want from becoming take. Not perfectly, we've failed a lot, but we keep trying because the alternative is unacceptable. Krarina's frills drooped. On Lithar, during vernal heat, there are sanctuaries, locks, scent dampeners. The young are kept separate, the elders oversee. It is not choice, it is weather. Sounds exhausting, I said quietly. It is tradition, she replied, then hesitated. And fear, I nodded. Yeah, we have fear too, we just aim it at different things. For a while the hum of the station filled the space between us, air circulation, distant footsteps, the quiet heartbeat of a place that existed only because 1,000 systems cooperated. Krarina finally spoke again, voice small. The others will think you are dangerous, I snorted. They already do, I sneezed once and Avelian thought it was a territorial roar. Krarina didn't laugh. So, I said gently, what do you think? She looked at me with the intensity of a student staring at an exam and realizing it's not just about facts, it's about worldview. I think, she said slowly, that a species without a season should not be stable, and yet you are, I shrugged, uncomfortable. We're trying. Krarina's frills lifted just a little. Then perhaps the monster is not your constant capability. What is it then? She swallowed. Your constant restraint. The rumor spread anyway. By evening, the entire ring knew that human males had no mating season, and interspecies gossip does what it always does. It took a nuanced biological detail and turned it into a horror story. Humans are always ready. Humans can choose. Humans don't have lockouts. Humans don't have safety weeks. Humans are uncontrolled, or worse, controlled. I got 3 different anonymous messages through the campus net. One was a link to an article titled Continuous Fertility, the Silent Threat. One was a marriage proposal. I declined politely and blocked the sender. One was a warning, stay away from LYTHARI during Heat Week. Heat Week. I frowned. I'd seen the station calendar. The Lithari vernal heat wasn't on campus. It was on the ring's civilian habitat where thousands of Lithari workers lived, and it started in 2 days. I pinged Krarina, you okay? Also, what's Heat Week like out there? Her reply came a minute later, like a storm, and storms can be used. Please meet me at the Commons, urgent. The Commons was a wide plaza of hydroponic trees and floating lights. Students gathered in clusters, pretending not to stare at me as I walked in. Krrina was waiting by the koi pond equivalent, little bioengineered gliders that skimmed the water and changed color when you fed them. Her crest was darker than usual, her frills were tight. "Marcus," she said, "we have a problem." "Tell me," I said. She glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to read lips. "There is a group," she whispered, calling themselves the Natural Cycle Union. "They believe the university's mixed species policies are corrupting the sanctity of heat." "Okay," I said, cautious, "that sounds like a cult." "They have acquired," she hesitated, and her translator struggled with the term pheromone amplifiers. My stomach dropped. "To do what?" "To flood the habitat," she said, voice shaking, "and force an uncontrolled heat surge. They believe it will purge outsiders and prove lithari superiority." I stared at her. "That's assault, that's terrorism." Krrina's eyes shone. "Yes." I ran a hand through my hair. "How do you know this?" "My cousin works security in Habitat 3, she said. "He intercepted messages, but he cannot act openly without proof. They hide behind cultural tradition." I felt anger rise, hot, steady, and weirdly familiar. Humans had seen this pattern 1,000 ways, people using biology as destiny, using tradition as a weapon, using fear as permission. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Krrina hesitated. It was the first time she looked unsure around me. "I need," she said quietly, "the thing your species claims to have: choice, control. You are not affected by lithari pheromones the same way. Your receptors are weaker. You can move through the habitat during heat week without losing yourself." I blinked. "You want me to be what? A runner?" "A witness," she said. "A stabilizer, someone who can help the vulnerable reach sanctuaries if the amplifiers activate. Someone the Union cannot sway." I swallowed. I wasn't a soldier. I was a student with mediocre grades in comparative endocrinology and a knack for asking questions that made aliens faint. But I thought about the people in Habitat 3, families, young adults, outsiders, anyone who didn't have the sanctuary locks or the elders' oversight. I thought about the idea that storms can be used. "Okay," I said, "tell your cousin I'll help, and tell him to bring actual security because I'm not punching anyone." Krrina's frills lifted, trembling. "Thank you," I tried to grin. "Just don't faint again, I'm running out of dignity." She made the lithari version of a laugh, soft clicks, and a warm puff of scent like citrus, then her crest dimmed again. "The Union's leader," she said, "is a professor's aide. He has access to the ventilation controls." My blood ran cold. "Names," I said. "Heat week began the way storms always do, with a change in the air you could feel before you could measure." Habitat 3's corridors were lined with lithari scent-dampening panels, safety architecture built into the walls. Normally, their systems kept pheromone levels within regulated bounds, with sanctuary doors that sealed at a moment's notice. That morning, I walked the habitat with Krrina's cousin Raquel, a security officer with shoulders like a freight door. He wore a respirator and carried a baton designed to deliver a stunning pulse without breaking skin, because even in panic, the station had rules. "Human," Raquel said, voice muffled through his mask. "You are certain you are not compromised?" "Define compromised," I said. He stared. "If a Litharian heat looked at you and demanded you obey, would you?" I stopped walking. Raquel's hand tightened on his baton. I thought about what Krrina had asked me in the infirmary. "Why do you not seize?" I met his gaze. "No," I said simply. Raquel's frills fluttered almost involuntarily. The translator didn't know what to do with my certainty, so it just delivered it flat. "No," it repeated. Raquel exhaled slowly. "Then you are what you claim." "What I claim is I'd rather not ruin my life and someone else's because the air got spicy," I muttered. Raquel made a sound that might have been amusement. "Good, stay close." We reached a junction where the main ventilation trunk split. An engineer was already there, hands inside an access panel, muttering. "Vent dampeners are glitching," she said without looking up. She was Velian, long neck, bright eyes, perpetually anxious. "Readings are rising, but the system says it's compensating. It's not." Raquel swore in Lithari, a string of syllables that sounded like someone slapping wet cloth. That's when the alarms hit, not the fire alarms, not the breach alarms. The sanctuary alarms, a pulsing tone designed to guide Lithari by instinct toward safe zones. The air changed. It wasn't a smell exactly. It was a pressure in the sinuses, a warmth behind the eyes, a subtle tug at the back of the brain where ancient mammalian wiring lived. I understood suddenly why species feared this. The corridor filled with movement. Lithari residents emerged from apartments, frills flared, eyes wide, some laughing nervously, some crying, some already unsteady. A young Lithari, barely adult, staggered into the hall and grabbed the wall, breathing hard. Raquel snapped orders into his comm. Seal sanctuaries, guide non-Lithari to Sector Blue, do not engage physically unless necessary, the engineer's voice rose. The vent system, just someone overrode the dampeners. Raquel whirled toward the access panel. A shadow moved behind him. A Lithari male in a university aide uniform, crest marked with academic silver, stepped into view with a small control slate. His frills were lifted in something like triumph. "Let nature speak," he said. Raquel lunged. The aide pressed a button. The vents exhaled. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. People cried out. Some collapsed. Some surged toward each other with desperate, half-feral urgency. Raquel froze mid-step, eyes going glassy. The aide smiled, intoxicated by his own righteousness. "See." He whispered, "No locks, no rules, only truth." My stomach clenched. The tug in my brain intensified, an invitation, an excuse, a loosening. It would have been so easy to become an animal and call it destiny. Instead, something else rose in me, older than desire. The stubborn human refusal to let anything, hormones, history, fear, be the boss. I stepped between the aide and Raquel. The aide's eyes snapped to me. "Human," he hissed. "You should be the first to understand. Your males have no season. No purity, no boundaries. You are always choosing," I cut in. The word came out like a door slamming. The aide blinked, confused. I kept my voice steady. "You're using biology as permission. That's not tradition. That's cowardice with incense." His frills trembled. "You cannot resist." "Watch me." I grabbed the control slate. He tried to yank it back, but I twisted, not hard enough to injure, just enough to break his grip. Then I stepped away and held the slate above my head like a trophy. Raquel shook himself as if waking from a dream. His gaze cleared just enough to register what I'd done. "Seal the trunk," I shouted to the engineer. "Manual override." Yes," she squeaked, hands flying. The aide lunged at me, eyes wild. Raquel slammed his baton into the aide's side with a crackle of blue light. The aide crumpled, frills drooping, consciousness sliding away. Raquel stared at me, truly stared, as if recalculating every rumor he'd heard about humans. "You were exposed," he said, voice rough. "And you stood." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, that's kind of the deal." The engineer's panel sparked. The vent trunk shutters slammed shut with a satisfying clang. The air pressure eased, the invisible tug loosened. People were still shaken, still flushed and frightened, but the wave was contained. Sanctuaries held, security teams arrived. Medical drones zipped overhead like silver fish. Kararina appeared at the end of the corridor, breathless, crest dark with fear. When she saw me standing, slate in hand, she stopped as if her legs had forgotten how to work. Then she crossed the distance in a rush and grabbed my arm with all four hands. "You did not fall," she whispered. "I told you," I said, trying to sound casual and failing. "I'm mostly just anxious." Kararina's frills fluttered and her eyes shone with something that wasn't heat, it was awe. Raquel spoke into his comm. "Suspect down, evidence secured, initiate arrests." He paused, then added, quieter, "And someone get the human water." By the time Heat Week ended, the natural cycle union was gone, arrested, expelled, their tradition stripped down to what it really was, a plan to harm people. The campus net did what it always did too, the rumors shifted. Now it was humans are always ready, it was humans are always able and still say no. Students who'd avoided me before now watched from a distance with wary respect, like I was a predator that had decided inexplicably to become a shepherd. Professor Seln invited me to speak in Lecture Hall 9 again. This time Kararina sat beside me on purpose. Seln displayed the same chart, but the room felt different, less like a trial, more like a question the galaxy was finally brave enough to ask. "Marcus Hale," Seln said, "in light of recent events, would you redefine your species anomaly?" I stood, feeling the weight of every eye again, only now it didn't crush me, it steadied me. "Humans don't have a mating season," I said, "but we do have something else." The translator shimmered, eager. "We have practice," I continued. "We practice restraint, we practice respect, we practice asking instead of taking, and yeah, sometimes we fail. But we built our whole civilization around the idea that impulses don't get to be destiny." Kararina's crest warmed beside me like a small sun. "And if you're wondering how we survive without a season," I added, letting a little humor in, "the answer is lots of awkward conversations and an unreasonable amount of paperwork." A ripple of laughter moved through the hall, clicks, trills, chirps, and even the polyhedron's pleasant tone. Professor Seln inclined their umbrella body. A remarkable adaptation, they said, to build culture as a biological counterweight. I looked out at the room at species bound to cycles and moons and inherited storms. Then I said the thing I hadn't realized I believed until I stood in pheromone-heavy air and chosen to remain myself. Maybe, I said, the strongest season isn't the one your body forces on you. I glanced at Krarina, and she didn't faint this time, she smiled. Maybe the strongest season, I finished, is the one you choose to live in every day.